Hi folks, it's Coach Kelvin here from the We Run Virtual Run Club, and We Run coach for Leeds and surrounding areas as well as online coaching. In this little video, we're going to talk about threshold training. You often hear us going on about lots and lots of easy running to build up that aerobic capacity, aerobic endurance, connective tissue capacity, muscle strength, and all those great things. But once we've built these systems, we can then teach the body how to use them at higher intensities and therefore faster paces in order to get faster as runners, or to be able to work even more efficiently at slower paces, which then allows us to go longer distances. And to do these things, we can do what we call threshold training. And threshold training is actually quite badly understood and therefore quite badly managed by runners. And a lot of runners end up running threshold like way too hard. And the reason it's misunderstood is there's quite a lot of confusion around what threshold actually is. And historically, threshold has been top end zone 3. And one reason there's a little bit of confusion is in the US they call top end zone 3 lactate threshold, and in the UK we call top end zone 2 lactate threshold and top end zone 3 lactate turn point. So there can be a little bit of confusion there with the terminology, but what we often think of threshold is top end zone 3. So depending on the runner, that could almost be anything from someone who's quite new to running. It could be 5k race intensity, to a really well-trained runner. Threshold might be half marathon pace. So that's another reason it's quite badly understood, is it's actually kind of a really sort of broad spectrum of different intensities for different people. So if we think about threshold as being more zone 3 rather than the top of zone 3, and maybe let's just think of how to put this. Let's think if we were doing like longer distance events, like maybe half marathons, and maybe even ultras, threshold might be quite low in zone 3. And if we're training for shorter distance events, maybe 3 to 5k, maybe then up to 10k even, threshold might be a little bit higher in zone 3. So it really depends on what you're training for. And kind of here's an example of a workout. And if we take that kind of 80-20 rule, which I've explained 80-20 in some videos, where 80% of the running is predominantly aerobic and easy, and 20% of your running is a little bit harder. But what's quite interesting is most of that 20% is threshold, because the VO2 work and the neuromuscular work that is zone 4 and 5 is such a small percentage. We can, it doesn't really make that much kind of difference to that threshold. VO2 work might be like 2%, neuromuscular might be like 0.5%. So most of that 20% is threshold work. And if we think about like a threshold workout, we might be looking at something like 3 times 2k plus 3 times 1k. This is off 2 minutes recovery, so relatively short recoveries with threshold, or something like 10 times 1k. And if we think about that 20%, that would obviously be relevant for a runner running 50k a week. And if a runner's running half of that, they could kind of half those workouts. And for most runners, we wouldn't want that to be right up at the top of zone 3, which actually feels quite hard. It's more training that feels kind of strong, but something that we're still recovering well from. If we do all our threshold right up the top of zone 3, it's really, really risky, very difficult to recover from, and therefore we don't get the full benefit of it. So try to think of threshold as zone 3. And for longer distance events, threshold can be longer efforts towards the bottom end of zone 3. And for shorter distance events, it can be shorter efforts more towards the top of zone 3. But what we don't want to do is try to do longer efforts at the top end of zone 3, which we see so many runners doing on a regular basis, and it causes all sorts of problems in their training. So I hope that makes some sort of sense. As I sort of mentioned, it's quite a confusing topic, so I'd really appreciate any questions in the comments below. And for now, happy running.